In this video, we're going to be looking at a instructional routine that is called Fraction Talks. This routine was originated by a math educator out of Saskatchewan. His name is Nat Banting. He also curates a website that is called fractiontalks.com that houses a lot of resources and ideas about how to implement this routine. And we'll share with you where we can find or where all these kind of resources are housed on NLPS Learns at the end of this video. So this is one of the ways that we really try to drive the understanding of fractions home for students by using the area model, showing them a visual representation of fractions, using some words, and then we start using our numbers and our different representations of fractions. And we can use the area model within this pie model we see here on the left-hand side, or we're using a number line where we're still utilizing this area model here. So as we want to push them and think creatively about fractions and move them away from just these standard models of the area model, we want to get them thinking slightly differently, or try to. Okay, and one of the ways that I really like to try and do this and to bridge into thinking flexibly about fractions is by giving them some coloring to do. And in this example, they're just going to make and represent 1/4. And as they represent a quarter, this allows them to represent it how they normally might do. You can see obvious quarters in these drawings. So they might go in and represent a quarter here, a quarter here, oopsies, a quarter here. So there are our standard representations of a quarter that they might color in and show us that that is a quarter. But now they have to represent these a little bit more creatively. And maybe they're going to use the triangles. And they're going to say, all right, I'm going to use this triangle here, this one here, and then I'm going to use this one here because I can see that it fits in the shape. And so this is one way that they're taking and thinking a little bit differently. So now with this last one, they could do it, maybe they're using this, and then they're using a square. So they're still using these to represent in different ways. And I would challenge students, if they find this pretty easy or they want more of a challenge, ask them to think super creatively about the way that they're representing this fraction and just, practice it a few times. So as we get into our fraction talks, we want the students, again, to be thinking about the area or the fraction that's represented by a shape. And when we look at this, what's one of the questions that might pop into your head if we're kind of using that as our driving thinking? Well, one of the things we might think about is how much of the square is orange or purple. This might be one of the first questions that we might ask the students. But what we really want to get at here is we want to say, how do you know how much of the square is shaded purple? This is just another way to think about this, to frame it for students so that they're really getting into their thinking and to be able to represent how they know. In this fraction talk, we really want to be focusing on the multiple strategies that students might use to represent their thinking. So in this routine, we want to first show the fraction, and then we're just going to get into a think, pair, share. Give them some independent think time, then some time to think together and have a generative process coming up with some new ideas, and then share that with the whole group where we can actually see and represent their thinking in some way. So I'd like you to take a minute. What is the way that you would show how you know what fraction of this square is shaded purple? So once we've given some students some time to think independently, then we want them to get into that pairing process. This is where we can use some of those wonderful teacher moves that we have in our back pocket. And that's just monitoring around some of these things. We're listening to the students, we're questioning them, we're trying to figure out their misunderstandings or their misinterpretation of maybe ideas about what they have around fractions. Then as we're doing this, we want to identify some work to share. We invite those students to share what they've done. And then as we're sharing, we want to sequence them from the most concrete or the most visual ways of representing the fractions, maybe even the most, the least inefficient ways of sharing or of understanding the fractions, to the most abstract ways. And so this is important to build students' understanding around how they could move their thinking forward. And the last part is annotating or showing that the student thinking as they're sharing. So we want to have the students either be sharing their understanding on the board, they come up, they share their thinking, or they can try and explain it to you and you represent it on that fraction talk that we're looking at. So with this fraction talk, as they're sharing with us, there's multiple different ways that they could probably show us their thinking. One of the ways they might do this is purely by counting. So they see that there's 6 purple or here, 3 and 3, and they know that there are 24 in total. So they might just say, that's how I know. I counted them, and I know that the fraction is 12 out of 24. Okay, so this is just one way that the students might share their thinking. And this is maybe one that I might use first, as it's not super efficient, and it's still representing the fraction as a half, just in a different way. Then a student might say, well, I saw it by moving the pieces around. And I said, instead of these being blue, I pretended like they were purple. And now I see 2 rows of 6, or they could say that it's half of the rectangle. So different ways of representing their thinking, and they'll always surprise you with the strategies that they come up with. But now moving on to one where it's not quite as representative of this, the typical area model that the students might see. Now they have to be creative. And once the very first time that you give this to students, it might be very challenging for them. And when this was given to a student, this was one of the reactions that we got from this is, this can't be a fraction because all the shapes are not the same size. So instead of saying, oh, no, they don't get this. Well, what does the student know? What do they know about this? And they have a really strong understanding here that all the pieces of the fraction should be the same size. So now how can we guide them towards a strategy that lets them partition this shape so that all of the pieces are the same size? Okay, so looking back on this one, what we might get the students to do, or a strategy that other students in the class might be doing, and so sharing that collective knowledge in the class, is they might take and they might partition this up. They might say, all right, so now I'm separating this up into different pieces, and now I have 16 pieces that are of equal size. This could just be one of the strategies that they use. And now they see that they have 1/16, a 2/16, and 3/16. So this is driving home 2 things. One, counting in unit fractions, and the second is going to be equal partitioning of a fraction. And so they have to think critically about this. They have to think creatively and come up with a way to solve for that shaded area. So this is just maybe one of the ways. There are going to be more ways that students show you their thinking on this, but just as an idea about how this could be utilized within your class. So all the things that I had looked at today with these fraction talks can be found on NLPS Learns. More resources will be there as well, prompting questions and other ways of using these fraction talks. You can go to Numeracy, Planning Resources and Instructional Routines, and you'll see over here on the left-hand side that Instructional Routines tab that you click on. And if you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to contact us, and just contact the learning line at st68.bc.ca, and we'll help you with any questions that you might have around this.